Willow Anderson stared at her phone screen, wondering if she'd actually lost her mind by downloading this dating app at 2 in the morning after 3 glasses of wine and a romantic comedy marathon that left her feeling lonelier than ever. The notification chimed, bright and insistent in the dim light of her Brooklyn apartment. She had a match. Willow swiped to see the profile, expecting another gym selfie or a picture with a sedated tiger from some questionable wildlife sanctuary. Instead, she found herself looking at a man with dark hair and striking blue eyes, photographed casually in what looked like a bookstore. His profile name was simple: James, 32. His bio read, architecture enthusiast, coffee snob. Believe the best conversations happen over breakfast at midnight. Something about it felt different, real. She typed a message before she could overthink it. Midnight breakfast sounds chaotic. I'm listening. The response came faster than she expected. The best things usually are. Tell me pancakes or waffles. This is a deal-breaker question. Willow found herself grinning despite her exhaustion. Waffles, the structural integrity is superior. A woman of science, I'm impressed. James here, by the way, James Ortega, Willow Anderson. And it's not science, it's common sense. Syrup pools are essential. Over the next 3 hours, they messaged back and forth with an ease that startled her. He was witty without trying too hard, asked questions that actually required thought, and never once asked for her Instagram or made a weird comment about her appearance. When she finally forced herself to put down the phone at 5 in the morning, her cheeks hurt from smiling. She worked as a children's book illustrator, freelancing from her small apartment while juggling part-time shifts at a local art supply store to make rent. It wasn't glamorous, but she loved bringing stories to life with watercolors and ink. Her current project was a series about a brave little fox navigating the city, and she'd been stuck on a particularly tricky spread for weeks. The next morning, groggy and running on maybe 2 hours of sleep, Willow grabbed her usual coffee from the corner bodega and headed to the art store. Her coworker and friend, Maya, took one look at her face and raised an eyebrow. You look like you either had the best night of your life or the worst. Which is it? I matched with someone on that app you made me download. Maya's eyes lit up. And we talked until 5 in the morning about everything from breakfast foods to whether cities have personalities. Willow Anderson, are you blushing? She was. We're meeting for coffee tomorrow. He suggested this place in Manhattan. Please tell me you stalked him online first. I tried. His profile doesn't link to anything. It's refreshing, actually, like he's not performing his life for strangers. What Willow didn't know was that James Ortega had several very good reasons for keeping his online presence minimal. As the CEO of Ortega Development Group, one of the most successful real estate and commercial development companies on the East Coast, his face was regularly featured in business publications and architecture journals. At 32, he'd built an empire worth over $300 million, transforming city skylines with buildings that prioritized both beauty and sustainability. He joined the dating app on a whim, encouraged by his sister, who was tired of watching him work 80-hour weeks without anything resembling a personal life. She'd helped him create a profile that stripped away the CEO persona, focusing instead on who he actually was when he wasn't in board meetings or negotiating deals. James sat in his corner office 50 stories above Manhattan, looking at Willow's profile for probably the 20th time that day. Her pictures showed a woman with warm brown eyes and dark curly hair, often with paint smudges on her hands or cheeks. Her smile was genuine, reaching her eyes in a way that made his chest tighten. According to her profile, she was an illustrator who loved used bookstores, jazz music, and rainy afternoons. She'd answered one of the app prompts with, "I'm looking for someone who understands that making art isn't a hobby, it's breathing." He understood that. He felt the same way about architecture, about creating spaces that made people feel something. His assistant knocked on the glass door. "Your 3 o'clock is here." James glanced up, reluctantly pocketing his phone. He had 17 meetings scheduled this week, a major project breaking ground in Boston, and investors flying in from Singapore. But all he could think about was coffee tomorrow with a woman who believed waffles had superior structural integrity. Willow changed her outfit 4 times before settling on jeans, ankle boots, and a soft green sweater that Meyer insisted brought out her eyes. The coffee shop James had suggested was in the West Village, a cozy place called Birch and Brew that she'd walked past 100 times but never entered. She arrived 5 minutes early, nervous energy making her hands shake slightly as she pushed open the door. The interior was all exposed brick and plants hanging from the ceiling, natural light streaming through tall windows. She scanned the room and felt her stomach flip. He was already there, sitting at a corner table, and he was even better looking in person. Tall, probably 6'2", with broad shoulders under a dark Henley shirt. His hair was slightly messy in a way that looked effortless, and when he saw her, his face broke into a smile that made her forget how to walk normally. "Willow, James. Hi." She hoped her voice sounded steadier than she felt. He stood to greet her, and she caught a hint of cedar and citrus. "I ordered myself a coffee but waited for you. What's your poison?" "Latte, please, with oat milk if they have it." "They do. Trust me, I've done extensive research." His eyes sparkled with humor as he headed to the counter, and Willow used the moment to take a breath and remind herself that he was just a person, just a guy from an app, nothing to be nervous about. Except when he returned with her latte and a plate of biscotti to share, settling into the chair across from her with easy confidence. She realized this wasn't just anything. The chemistry she'd felt through messages was 10 times stronger in person. "So," James said, wrapping his hands around his cup, "structural integrity of waffles aside, tell me about these midnight conversations you mentioned. What keeps you up?" "Deadlines, mostly. I'm working on a children's book series right now, and sometimes the creative part of my brain only switches on when the rest of the world is asleep." She pulled out her phone, showing him some preliminary sketches of her brave city fox. "What about you? Your profile mentioned architecture." "I work in development. Commercial properties, mostly. There's something about watching a building go from concept to reality that never gets old." He leaned closer to look at her sketches, genuine interest on his face. "These are incredible. The detail work on the buildings in the background is really impressive. I spend a lot of time sketching the city. Every building has a story, you know." "I do know." His voice was warm. "That's exactly how I see it too." They talked for 2 hours without noticing the time pass. James asked about her process, about how she got into illustration, about the teachers who'd encouraged her and the rejections that had nearly made her quit. She told him about growing up in Portland with 2 older brothers who were both engineers, how she'd always been the creative one in a family of logical thinkers. "They love me, but they don't really get it," Willow admitted. "My mom still asks when I'm going to get a real job." "Art is as real as it gets. It's humanity distilled." James said it with such conviction that she believed he meant it. "What you do matters. You're shaping how kids see the world." Something in her chest loosened. "Thank you for saying that. I mean it." He held her gaze, and the moment stretched between them, charged and delicate. Willow learned that James had grown up in Queens, that his parents had immigrated from Mexico before he was born, that his father had been a construction worker who taught him to see beauty in building. He was close with his family, especially his younger sister Elena, who was in law school. What he didn't mention was the company, the money, the profile in Forbes last month that called him the millennial developer reshaping urban landscapes. He wanted her to know him first, before all of that complicated things. When they finally left the coffee shop, the afternoon had shifted into early evening, the sky turning purple over the city. "I have a crazy question," James said as they stood on the sidewalk, neither of them quite ready to leave. "Have you eaten? Not unless you count 3 biscotti as a meal. There's a taco place 2 blocks from here. Best in the city, I promise. Have dinner with me." Willow knew she should probably play it cool, not seem too eager. But standing there with him, feeling more comfortable than she'd felt with anyone in years, she didn't want to play games. Yes, absolutely yes. They walked through the village as the streetlights flickered on, talking and laughing, and Willow thought this might be the best first date she'd ever had. The taco place was tiny, barely 6 tables, with handmade tortillas and salsas that made her eyes water. James ordered in Spanish, easy and fluid, and she watched the way he interacted with the owner, warm and respectful. "You're full of surprises," she said. "Good surprises, I hope. The best kind." Over carnitas and carne asada, they talked about dreams and fears. James told her about his drive to create buildings that served communities, not just investors. Willow shared her secret hope of one day writing and illustrating her own books, not just bringing other people's stories to life. "Why is that secret?" James asked. "Because it feels presumptuous. Like I'm not good enough to tell my own stories yet." "That's fear talking, not truth. You're more than good enough, Willow." The way he said her name made her skin warm. She'd never been one for instant connections, had always thought the whole love at first sight thing was fiction. But sitting across from James, watching the candlelight play across his features, she felt something shift inside her. Something that felt a lot like falling. They stayed until the restaurant closed, until the owner was gently ushering them out with a knowing smile. On the sidewalk, James turned to her. "I don't want this to end." "Me neither." "Walk with me." Just a little longer, they wandered through Washington Square Park, past street musicians and late-night chess players. James told her about his favorite buildings in the city, pointing out architectural details she'd never noticed. She told him about the stories she imagined for strangers they passed. When they finally reached the subway station where Willow needed to catch her train back to Brooklyn, James caught her hand. "Can I see you again? Tomorrow? Is that too soon?" "Tomorrow is perfect." He squeezed her hand gently, then released it. "Text me when you get home safe." "I will." Willow floated down the subway steps, her phone already buzzing with a message from him. Already counting down the hours until tomorrow. She typed back, grinning like an idiot, "Me too." Over the next 2 weeks, they were inseparable. James cleared his schedule in ways that made his assistant ask if he was feeling all right. He met Willow for early morning coffee before she had to work at the art store. They had lunch in Central Park, sitting on a blanket while she sketched, and he answered emails on his phone, just happy to be near her. They spent an entire Saturday at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, arguing playfully about the Impressionists versus the Renaissance masters. Willow was falling hard and fast, in a way that would have terrified her if it didn't feel so right. James was attentive without being overwhelming, genuinely interested in her work, and made her laugh until her sides hurt. He was also incredibly respectful, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, though the tension between them built with every accidental touch and lingering look. She still didn't know exactly what he did, just that he worked in development and seemed to have flexible hours. His clothes were nice but not flashy, and he always insisted on paying for things, but in a casual way that didn't feel like showing off. She'd Googled his name once, but found dozens of James Ortegas and gave up, deciding she'd rather just get to know him organically. James, for his part, was falling just as hard. Willow was unlike anyone he'd ever dated. She was passionate and creative, with a way of seeing beauty in ordinary things that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with design in the first place. She wasn't impressed by status or money, and she challenged him in ways that made him want to be better. But the longer he waited to tell her the truth about who he was, the harder it became to find the right moment. He told himself he'd explain everything soon, after they'd had a little more time to just be James and Willow, without the complications of his public life. 3 weeks into whatever they were calling this, James invited Willow to a gallery opening in Chelsea. One of his college friends was showing her work, and he'd promised to attend. He picked Willow up from her apartment, seeing her space for the first time. It was small but full of light, with paintings and sketches covering every available wall. Her desk was organized chaos, jars of brushes and pencils next to stacks of reference books. The window looked out over a small courtyard where someone had planted wildflowers. "I love it," James said, meaning it. "It's so you." It's tiny and the radiator sounds like it's trying to communicate with the dead, but it's home. Willow grabbed her jacket, a vintage leather piece she'd found at a thrift store. She wore a black dress that hit just above her knees, simple but elegant, and James had to actively remind himself they had somewhere to be. The gallery was packed with Chelsea's art crowd, all dramatic gestures and expensive wine. James navigated them through the space, his hand on the small of Willow's back, until they found his friend Rachel. "James, you actually came," Rachel, a sculptor with paint-stained hands and bright red hair, pulled him into a hug before turning curious eyes on Willow. "And you brought someone." "This is a first." "Rachel, this is Willow." "Willow, Rachel, we went to Columbia together." "Columbia?" Willow glanced at James. He'd mentioned college but never where. "Art and architecture," Rachel explained. James was the only one in our program who could actually draw and understand engineering. "Show off." She winked. "I need to go schmooze some potential buyers, but let's catch up properly soon." As Rachel disappeared into the crowd, Willow turned to James. "You went to Columbia." "For graduate school, yeah. Undergrad was at Cornell." He said it casually, but something flickered across his face. "Is that weird?" "No, just impressive. Those are serious schools." "I was lucky. Good scholarships." It wasn't a lie exactly. He had gotten scholarships, even though he hadn't needed them by then. They moved through the gallery, discussing the sculptures, and James was relieved when Willow seemed to let it go. But he could feel the weight of his omission growing heavier. The moment that changed everything came a week later. Willow had morning shift at the art store, mindlessly restocking acrylic paints while Maya handled the register. A customer came in, a middle-aged woman in an expensive coat, looking for specialty brushes. "You have the Kolinsky sable rounds." "Size 6, Willow checked the inventory. "We have them on order, should be in next week." "That's disappointing. I needed them for this weekend." The woman sighed. "I'm doing a portrait commission for James Ortega. Do you know his work?" "The developer," Willow's hands stilled. "James Ortega." "Yes. His company is building that new mixed-use complex in Brooklyn. Gorgeous design. He commissioned a portrait for his parents' anniversary. Very sweet man, though I imagine being worth that much comes with some perks." The woman continued talking, but Willow couldn't hear over the rushing in her ears. She mechanically finished the transaction, then pulled out her phone the moment she could step away. "James Ortega, developer, New York," she typed into the search bar. The results flooded her screen. Articles from Business Insider, Forbes, the New York Times. Photos of James at galas and groundbreaking ceremonies, shaking hands with the mayor, accepting awards. Headlines calling him a visionary and a millionaire disruptor in commercial real estate. She clicked on one article from 3 months ago. Ortega Development Group closes $400 million deal for Manhattan waterfront project. At just 32, CEO James Ortega continues to expand his empire. Millionaire, CEO, she felt sick. Maya found her in the back room 20 minutes later staring at her phone. "Hey, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost, James." Willow's voice came out flat. "The guy I've been seeing, he's not just in development, he runs one of the biggest development companies in the city. He's a millionaire, Maya, and he never told me. Maybe he was going to tell you. When? After I fell completely in love with him. After I'd made a fool of myself talking about my tiny apartment and my freelance scraps." Anger was replacing the shock, hot and sharp in her chest. "He let me talk about struggling to make rent while he probably spends more on coffee in a month than I make in 3. Willow, that's not fair. You don't know why he didn't tell you. Because he thought it was funny. Because he wanted to see how long he could keep up the act." She grabbed her jacket. "I need to go." "Your shift isn't over for another 2 hours. Tell Marcus I'm sorry, I'll make it up. I just can't be here right now." Willow walked through Brooklyn, her mind spinning. Every moment from the past few weeks replayed with new context. The way he'd picked expensive restaurants but downplayed it. His flexible schedule that was really just the freedom of being his own boss. The casual mention of Columbia and Cornell, Ivy League schools she'd never thought to question. She felt stupid and angry and hurt, all mixed together in a knot she couldn't untangle. Her phone buzzed. "James. Lunch today. I found this amazing Vietnamese place I want to try with you." She stared at the message, then typed back with shaking fingers. "We need to talk. Can you come to Prospect Park? The boathouse?" The response came immediately. "Be there in 40 minutes. Everything okay?" She didn't answer. James arrived in 35 minutes, slightly out of breath like he'd been running. He found her sitting on a bench overlooking the water, her arms wrapped around herself despite the warm afternoon. "Willow, what's wrong?" The concern in his voice was genuine, which somehow made it worse. She turned to face him, and he actually took a step back at the expression on her face. James Ortega, CEO of Ortega Development Group, net worth estimated at over $300 million, youngest person to win the National Design Award, featured in Forbes, Bloomberg, Business Insider. Her voice was steady, cold. "Did I miss anything?" The color drained from his face. "Willow, I can explain." "Explain what?" "That you've been lying to me for a month. I never lied to you." "Omission is a lie, James. You let me believe you were just some guy who worked in development. You let me talk about my struggles, my tiny apartment, my part-time job at an art store. Do you know how humiliating this is?" "Why would that be humiliating? Nothing about you has changed. You're still the same person I fell for." "Fell for?" She laughed bitterly. "Was this some kind of experiment? See how the struggling artist lives? Get a taste of authenticity before you go back to your penthouse. Stop it." His voice was sharp now, hurt flashing in his eyes. "You know that's not what this was. I don't know anything about you. Everything I thought I knew was incomplete at best, a lie at worst. I wanted you to know me. Just me. Not the company, not the money, not the public persona. Can you understand that?" He moved closer, but she stood, putting more distance between them. "What I understand is that you didn't trust me enough to be honest. You made that choice for both of us. I was going to tell you. I was waiting for the right time. There's never going to be a right time for something like this, James. That's the point." Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I told you everything. My fears, my dreams, my struggles. and you kept this massive part of your life hidden. How am I supposed to trust anything between us now? Because what we have is real. The conversations, the connection, the way I feel about you, none of that was fake. But it was incomplete, and I can't do this." She grabbed her bag. "I can't be with someone who treats honesty like it's optional." "Willow, please, don't do this." He reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I need space. I need to think." "How much space? How much time?" "I don't know." She looked at him, and the pain in her expression nearly broke him. "You're not who I thought you were. And I need to figure out if I can live with that." She walked away before he could respond, leaving James standing by the boathouse, feeling like his entire world had just collapsed. The next week was hell for both of them. Willow threw herself into work, finishing the Fox illustration series in a burst of emotion-fueled productivity. She ignored James's texts, all 12 of them, each one more desperate than the last. "Please let me explain properly. I know I messed up. Tell me how to fix this. I miss you. I miss talking to you." Maya tried to be supportive but practical. "Look, he should have told you, but is this really worth throwing away something good? How do I know it was good? How do I know any of it was real? Because you know him, Willow. Money doesn't change the person he is, the conversations you had, the way he made you feel. It changes everything. We're from different worlds, only if you let it." Willow wanted to believe that, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw those articles, those photos of James in expensive suits at charity galas, shaking hands with people who probably spent more on watches than she made in a year. James wasn't doing much better. He went through the motions at work, but his focus was shot. Alina came by his office 3 days after the breakup and found him staring out the window instead of reviewing contracts. "You look like hell." "Thanks, sis. Always so supportive." "What happened with Willow?" "Mom said you were bringing her to Sunday dinner this week." "That's not happening." He filled her in on everything. The dating app, the decision to keep his identity quiet, the ugly confrontation at the park. Alina listened, then smacked him on the back of the head. "Oh, what was that for?" "For being an idiot. James, you should have told her." "I know that now. She has every right to be upset, but also I get why you did it. Every woman you've dated since you made your first million was more interested in your portfolio than your personality." Alina sat on the edge of his desk. "But this is different. She clearly cares about you, not your money. You need to fight for her." "She won't talk to me." "Then make her listen. Grand gesture time, big brother." "She hates grand gestures. She said they're manipulative romance novel nonsense." Alina grinned. "Then you'd better come up with something genuine." James thought about it for 2 days, ignoring his investor calls and pushing meetings. He thought about what mattered to Willow, what she cared about, what would show her he understood who she was. Then he had an idea. Willow was at her apartment the following Saturday, working on character studies for a new project when her buzzer rang. She ignored it. It rang again, more insistent. "Willow, it's me. Please, just 5 minutes, James." She should have told him to leave. Instead, she buzzed him up. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, his hair messy in a way that wasn't artful, wearing jeans and a rumpled shirt. He was carrying a large portfolio case. "Thank you for letting me up." He stood in her doorway, uncertain. 5 minutes. That's what you asked for, right? He took a breath. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't honest with you from the beginning. I'm sorry I let my fear of being judged by my bank account stop me from trusting you with the whole truth. You were right. You deserved better." Willow crossed her arms, not giving an inch. "Okay. I brought something. Can I show you?" She nodded. James opened the portfolio and pulled out architectural drawings, detailed, beautiful renderings of a building. "This is a project I've been working on for 3 years. A community arts center in Queens, near where I grew up." Free studio spaces for artists, galleries for local work, classrooms for kids. No profit margin. Actually, it's going to cost me about 15 million out of pocket. He spread the drawings on her small table. I've been trying to get it approved through every channel, fighting with the city, with investors who think I'm wasting my time. Willow moved closer, studying the drawings despite herself. The building was gorgeous, all light and open space with areas clearly marked for different arts, painting, sculpture, digital media. Why are you showing me this? Because this is who I am. Not the Forbes articles or the net worth estimates. This is what I care about. Creating spaces where people like you, people with talent and passion and stories to tell, can do their work without worrying about rent or supplies or whether they're good enough. His voice was raw, honest. I didn't tell you about the money because I was afraid you'd see that instead of me. But I should have trusted you. I should have known you'd understand that the money is just a tool to do work that matters. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the vulnerability there, the fear of losing her. You hurt me, James. I know, I'm so sorry. I felt stupid. Like I'd been performing my struggling artist routine for your entertainment. God, no. Willow, watching you work, listening to you talk about your art, it was the most real thing in my life. You reminded me why I do this, why any of it matters. He moved closer, not touching but near enough that she could feel his warmth. I'm not good at relationships. I work too much. I overthink everything, and I clearly make terrible decisions about when to disclose major life details. But I am so completely crazy about you. And I will spend however long it takes proving that I see you, the real you, and that's who I'm falling in love with. Her breath caught. Falling in love. Already fallen, actually. Pretty sure it happened on our first date when you got salsa on your nose and laughed instead of being embarrassed. A small, hopeful smile. I love you, Willow. I love your talent and your passion and the way you see stories in everything. I love that you eat the edges of your sandwich first and hum when you're concentrating. I love how you make me feel like I'm more than what I've built or earned. And I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm asking anyway. Willow felt tears spilling over. She'd been so angry, so hurt, but standing here listening to him, she realized Maya was right. Money didn't change who he was. The James in front of her, nervous and honest and holding his heart out, was the same man who'd spent 2 hours talking about architecture in a coffee shop, who'd encouraged her dreams, who'd made her feel seen. I was falling in love with you too, she admitted quietly. That's why it hurt so much. His voice broke on the word. Still am, even though I've been trying really hard not to be. Hope lit his face. Yeah, she moved closer, reaching up to touch his face. But we need ground rules, complete honesty from now on, no matter how uncomfortable. I promise. Absolute transparency. You want my tax returns, bank statements. I'll give you passwords to everything. She laughed, and it felt like breathing after being underwater. I don't need your passwords, you weirdo. I just need you to treat me like an equal partner who can handle the truth. You are. You absolutely are. He pulled her into his arms, and she let herself sink into his embrace, feeling the tension of the past week dissolve. I missed you so much. I missed you too, but James. Yeah. If you ever lie to me again, even by omission, I'm gone, no second chances. Understood? Complete honesty, starting now. He pulled back to look at her. I have a confession. Her stomach tightened. What? I've been wearing the same shirt for 2 days because doing laundry seemed impossible without you in my life. I'm kind of a disaster. She burst out laughing. That's disgusting. I know, I have another confession. Hit me. I want to introduce you to my family. My mom has been asking about you for weeks, and I've been stalling because I didn't know how to explain the whole situation. Okay, I'd like that. Willow smiled. Full disclosure from my end. I'm terrified to meet your family. What if they think I'm some gold digger now that I know about the money? My mom is going to love you because you make me happy. Also because you're an artist. She's going to show you every embarrassing drawing I made as a kid. Fair warning. I can handle that. They spent the rest of the afternoon on her couch, talking through everything. James explained the company, how he'd started with one small project after graduate school and built it into an empire, but how lately the success had felt hollow without someone to share it with. Willow talked about her fears of inadequacy, of not measuring up to his world. You don't need to measure up to anything, James insisted. You're not entering my world. We're building a new one together, one where your art and my buildings exist side by side. That's very romantic. I have my moments. He kissed her forehead. Can I take you to dinner? Somewhere nice. I want to celebrate not being miserable anymore. Only if you go home and change that shirt first. Deal. Meeting James's family 2 weeks later was less terrifying than Willow had anticipated. His parents lived in a comfortable house in Queens, warm and full of photos and life. His mother, Rosa, answered the door and immediately pulled Willow into a hug. Finally. He's been talking about you nonstop. Come in, come in. I made enough food for an army. James's father, Miguel, was quieter but kind, with the same blue eyes as his son. Alina was there with her girlfriend, and the dinner table was loud with conversation and laughter. They asked Willow about her work, genuinely interested, and Rosa insisted on seeing her portfolio. These are beautiful, Rosa said, studying the fox illustrations. You have real talent. James, you didn't tell me she was this good. I tried, but you never believe me when I gush. Because you never gush. This is new. Alina winked at Willow. You broke him. It's great. After dinner, Miguel pulled James aside while the women were in the kitchen. She's special, Mijo. I know, Dad. Don't screw it up. I'm trying really hard not to. Good. Your mother already has grandchildren names picked out, so no pressure. James laughed, but looking at Willow helping his mom with dishes, fitting seamlessly into his family, he could picture it. A future. A life together. It didn't scare him the way he thought it would. It felt right. Over the next few months, they navigated the reality of their relationship. James was right that the money changed things, but not in the ways Willow had feared. She had to adjust to security details at certain events, to photographers occasionally recognizing him, to the reality that his time wasn't always his own. But he made adjustments too. He cut back his hours, delegated more, made sure he was present when they were together. He came to her apartment and sat on the floor while she painted, content to just be near her. She started coming to his place, a beautiful loft in Tribeca that was somehow both expensive and homey, and slowly her things started appearing there. A toothbrush, a change of clothes, her favorite coffee mug. 4 months after they'd reconciled, James invited her to a groundbreaking ceremony. The Queen's Arts Center was finally happening, every approval secured, every permit in place. Willow stood next to him as he gave a speech about community and access, and the power of art. She watched him work the crowd afterward, gracious and genuine, and felt overwhelming pride. This was her person, using his resources and platform for good. Afterward, he took her inside the construction site, both of them in hard hats. I want to show you something. He led her to the south wing, where natural light poured through the skeletal frame. This is going to be the illustration studio. I designed it thinking about you, about what you'd need. North-facing windows for consistent light, plenty of storage, space for kids to work alongside professionals. James, this is incredible. There's something else. He pulled out a folder from his bag. I want you to run it. What? the illustration program. I want you to design the curriculum, choose the instructors, decide how it operates. Paid position, obviously. You'd still have time for your freelance work, but this would be yours. A chance to share what you know with kids who might not otherwise get the opportunity. Willow felt tears welling up. You're serious, completely. You're the best person for this. You understand what it's like to fight for your art, to struggle with doubt. These kids need someone who gets it. He took her hands. What do you think? I think you just offered me my dream job. Is that a yes? That's an absolutely yes. She threw her arms around him, hard hat and all. I love you. I love you too, so much. He held her tight, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling more content than he ever had in his life. 6 months later, Willow moved into James's loft officially. They'd been spending most nights together anyway, and her lease was up, and it just made sense. She turned one of the spare rooms into her studio, and James loved coming home to find her there, surrounded by paints and sketches, creating magic. The Arts Center opened to huge fanfare, covered by local news and praised by community leaders. Willow's illustration program had a waiting list within a week. Watching her work with the kids, patient and encouraging, James fell in love with her all over again. One evening, after a particularly successful first session, they were walking through Central Park. It was early fall, the leaves just starting to turn, the air crisp with promise. I have a crazy question, James said, echoing their first real conversation. I'm listening. Marry me. Willow stopped walking. What? He pulled out a ring, simple and elegant, a sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds. I've been carrying this for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. But I realized there's never a perfect moment, just real ones. And this is real. Us here, right now. I want forever with you, Willow. I want to build a life together, messy and complicated and absolutely honest. Marry me. Yes. She was crying, laughing, nodding all at once. Yes, of course, yes. He slid the ring on her finger and it fit perfectly. They kissed there in the middle of the path, while joggers and tourists moved around them, and Willow thought about that night months ago when she downloaded a dating app on a whim, never imagining it would lead here. We should call our families, James said when they finally came up for air. In a minute. I just want to stay in this moment a little longer. We have all the time in the world now. They got married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the Arts Center, surrounded by family and close friends. Willow wore a simple dress she'd found at a vintage shop, flowers in her hair. James cried during his vows, which surprised no one. Elena was maid of honor, and made a toast about how her brother had been insufferable before Willow, and was now merely occasionally annoying, which everyone agreed was progress. Rosa and Miguel slow danced, and Willow's parents flew in from Portland, her engineer brothers grudgingly admitting that James seemed like a good guy. Maya caught the bouquet and threatened to murder Willow if she ever got that sappy, even though she was crying too. For their honeymoon, they went to Mexico City, where James showed her the architecture that had first inspired him. They wandered through museums and markets, ate street food, and stayed up too late talking. Willow sketched everything, creating a visual diary of their trip. What are you drawing? James asked one morning, finding her on the balcony of their hotel. Us. Our story. I think I'm finally ready to write my own book. Tell me about it. It's about taking chances, about finding connection in unexpected places. About 2 people from different worlds building something new together. She showed him the rough sketches. A woman with dark curly hair and a man with blue eyes, meeting across a table with coffee cups between them. I love it, but you're a better artist than this version of me. She swatted him playfully. It's a rough draft. You'll be prettier in the final version, as long as you get my good side. You don't have a bad side, lies, but I appreciate the bias. They spent 2 weeks in Mexico, and when they returned, Willow started working on her book in earnest. She wrote and illustrated late into the night, James bringing her tea and snacks, occasionally reading over her shoulder and making suggestions. The Arts Center thrived. Willow's program expanded to include after-school sessions and summer intensives. James took on a protege at work, teaching someone else his approach so he could step back more, spend more time at home. They talked about kids, about timing, about what kind of parents they wanted to be. On their first anniversary, Willow showed James a positive pregnancy test, and he picked her up and spun her around their kitchen, both of them laughing and crying. "We're having a baby," he kept saying, like he couldn't believe it. "We're having a baby," she confirmed, equally amazed. Their daughter arrived 9 months later, perfect and tiny, with dark hair and her father's blue eyes. They named her Sophia Rosa after both grandmothers. Willow's book had just been published, a story about love and art and taking chances, and it was climbing bestseller lists. James held his daughter in the hospital room, Willow exhausted but glowing beside him, and thought about the path that had led them here. A dating app swipe, a coffee shop conversation, the courage to be honest after failing at it, the grace to forgive and rebuild. "What are you thinking about?" Willow asked sleepily. "How lucky I am. How none of this would have happened if you hadn't given me a second chance. You earned it. Plus, your grand gesture with the portfolio worked. Very romantic for someone who claims he doesn't do romance. I had good motivation." He carefully placed Sophia in Willow's arms, watching them together, his whole world in one frame. "I love you both so much. We love you too. Even though you're a millionaire CEO who forgot to mention that for a month. Are we ever going to let that go? Never. It's part of our story. The messy, honest, beautiful story." Sophia yawned, tiny and perfect, and James thought that Willow was right. It was messy and honest and beautiful, all of it. From that first match to this moment, every complicated, real, wonderful piece of it. 2 years later, they sat in their living room, Sophia asleep upstairs, Willow working on her third book while James reviewed plans for another community arts center, this one in Brooklyn. The fire crackled, snow falling softly outside. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Willow asked, looking up from her sketches. "If you told me the truth from the start, or if I hadn't forgiven you, or if we just missed each other entirely, all the time, I think about how close I came to losing you. But you didn't. We figured it out. We did. Imperfectly, but we did." He closed his laptop, moving to sit beside her. "I'm glad you swiped right. Me too. Best decision I ever made, well, second best. What was first? Saying yes to the second date, and the third, and the rest of our lives." He kissed her, soft and familiar and still electric after all this time. Outside, the city hummed with life, millions of stories unfolding. But this was theirs, built on honesty and grace and the courage to keep choosing each other every single day. Their story had started with a match on a dating app, two people taking a chance on connection. It had survived miscommunication and hurt, and the challenge of bridging different worlds. And it had bloomed into something neither of them had imagined possible. A partnership grounded in truth, a love that grew deeper with each passing day, a family built on the foundation they'd fought to create together. Years later, when Sophia was old enough to ask how they met, James and Willow would tell her the whole story, not leaving out the hard parts or the mistakes. They'd tell her about coffee shops and architectural drawings, about the importance of honesty and the power of forgiveness. They'd tell her that love wasn't about perfection, but about showing up, being real, and choosing each other even when it was difficult. And Sophia, sitting between them on the couch, would roll her eyes at their mushiness but secretly hope she'd find something even half as good someday. Because even at 8 years old, she could see it in the way they looked at each other, in the casual touches and inside jokes, in the way their whole house felt warm with love. James built buildings that changed skylines, but his greatest creation was this: a home filled with laughter and art and honesty, where a once lonely CEO and a struggling illustrator raised their daughter to believe in taking chances and fighting for what mattered. Where paintings lined the walls next to architectural sketches, where breakfast for dinner was a regular occurrence, where love was messy and imperfect and absolutely real. On their 10th anniversary, James took Willow back to that first coffee shop in the West Village. It looked the same, warm and welcoming, and they sat at the same corner table where everything had started. 10 years, Willow marveled. Feels like yesterday and forever ago at the same time. Best decade of my life. James reached across the table, taking her hand. Thank you for seeing me. All of me. Even when I made it really hard. Thank you for being worth the effort, for building our life together brick by brick. Very architect of you with the brick metaphor. I've been practicing. She grinned. I have something for you. I finished it last night. She pulled out a small wrapped package. Inside was a leather-bound book, handmade and filled with her illustrations. Every major moment of their relationship captured in her distinctive style. Their first date, the fight in the park, the proposal, their wedding, Sophia's birth, ordinary moments of domesticity made extraordinary through her artist's eye. Willow, this is incredible. James's voice was thick with emotion as he flipped through the pages. You made our whole story. Not the whole story, we're still writing it, but this is volume 1. Thought we could fill more books as we go. I love you so much. He stood, pulling her up with him, kissing her right there in the coffee shop where it all began, not caring about the other customers or the barista watching with a knowing smile. They walked through the city afterward, hand in hand, talking about everything and nothing. They stopped at the arts center, checking on evening classes, Willow giving feedback to a young illustrator who reminded her of herself years ago. They picked up Sophia from James's parents, where she'd been spending the night, and headed home together. That night, after Sophia was asleep and they'd cleaned up from dinner, James found Willow in her studio, working on a new piece. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. What's this one about? It's about a girl who learns to fly. Not literally, just metaphorically. Learning to trust herself, to take up space, to believe she's enough. Like her mother, maybe. Art is autobiographical even when we don't mean it to be. She leaned back against him, comfortable and content. Do you ever regret it? The crazy hours you used to work, the single-minded focus on building the company. Would you go back if you could? Not for a second. What I have now is worth more than any deal or building could ever be. You taught me that. You and Sophia. He turned her to face him. You're my greatest adventure, Willow. Every day with you is better than the last. That's the goal. Keep the bar rising. She kissed him. I love our life. The messy, chaotic, beautiful life we built. Me too. Every imperfect moment of it. They stood there in her studio, surrounded by the physical evidence of her dreams, in the home they'd created together. And Willow thought about that night. She downloaded a dating app in a moment of wine-fueled loneliness. She'd been looking for connection, for someone who understood her, for a chance at love that felt real. She'd found all that and more. She'd found a partner who challenged her and supported her, who'd made mistakes but owned them, who built her a studio in a community arts center and believed in her talent when she doubted herself. She'd found someone who understood that love wasn't about perfection but about showing up, being honest, and choosing each other through the hard moments. She'd found James. her match on a dating app, her perfect partner. The millionaire CEO who'd fallen for a struggling artist and never once made her feel like she was anything less than his equal. The man who taught her that different worlds could merge and create something better than either alone. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was better than that. It was real, messy and complicated, and absolutely worth every moment. It was proof that taking chances could lead to magic, that honesty could heal wounds, that love could bridge any gap if both people were willing to build the bridge together. As they turned off the lights and headed to bed, walking past Sophia's room where she slept peacefully, past the walls covered in Willow's art and James's architectural prints, through the home they'd made together, Willow felt a surge of gratitude so strong it nearly took her breath away. "Thank you," she whispered to James in the darkness of their bedroom. "For what? For being brave enough to message me back, for falling in love with me, for building this life with me, for everything. Thank you for giving me a second chance, for seeing past the money to who I really am, for making me want to be better." He pulled her close, his voice soft against her hair. "For being my home." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, dreaming of tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that. Of watching Sophia grow, of new projects and adventures, of growing old together and filling more volumes of their illustrated story. Of a love that had started with a swipe and a match and grown into something that would last forever. Outside, the city sparkled with possibility, full of people searching for connection, for love, for something real. Somewhere, someone was downloading a dating app, hoping for magic. Somewhere, two people were taking a chance on each other, beginning their own story. But in this loft in Tribeca, in this home built on honesty and grace, James and Willow had already found their happily ever after. Not perfect, but real. Not easy, but worth it. Not the end of their story, but the beautiful middle with so much more still to come. And as they slept, wrapped in each other's arms, Sophia's soft breathing down the hall, art on the walls and love in every corner, their story continued. Not with dramatic declarations or grand gestures, but with the quiet, powerful certainty that they'd found what everyone searches for. A partner, a home, a love that was absolutely, perfectly, imperfectly theirs. That was their story. A match on a dating app that became a marriage, a family, a lifetime. Proof that sometimes the best things begin with taking a chance on a stranger. That honesty matters more than perfection. That love, real love, is built day by day, choice by choice, through the mess and the magic of simply showing up for each other. And they lived happily, honestly, beautifully ever after.